listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Wild Card Weekend Preview, Part 2 for Monday, December 30th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, time to get to the other side of the counter, talking Wild Card Weekend. Brian Blessing and Bruce Marshall in Las Vegas, ready to rock and roll, diving into the 4 playoff games this weekend. Odd dynamic, Bruce, with the AFC games on Saturday and the NFC games on Sunday. Usually they split them up.
I know. The last time I remember them splitting them up like that was 1977, Brian, when they actually skipped Sunday because it was Christmas, and that used to be a big deal not to play on Christmas. So they did them on Saturday. That was AFC. That was goes to the post, Oakland, Baltimore, and Denver, Pittsburgh. And then on Monday, it was Bears and Cowboys and Rams and Vikings. And I think that's the last time they had both conferences on the same day. So this is a little bit different, but that's what we got.
All right, we're looking at a game here to start with Buffalo at Houston. Houston, a 3-point favorite. Total on the game is 41.5. And it's funny, here we are at the tail end of the year, and it's like all of a sudden some respect for Buffalo shows up in terms of the number. And sometimes we tell you that the number is telling. I'll just throw this at you, Bruce. I mentioned this to Jack. I knew they were very good. I wonder if they're even better than very good, the Bills defense. This is from NFL research. The Bills have allowed 25-plus points only once this year, and that was a goofball game against the Eagles. And it ties several teams for the fewest such games in a season going back the last 80 years. With that defense, the Bills are in every game.
They are in every game. And one preface here for all these games, just to note, the last 2 years, 8 wild card games, underdogs 8-0 against the spread. So recent history has been underdogs. Now that has turned around in the past, and we've seen the year before that the favorites covered all the games. But last couple of years, underdogs have been the way to go. Good case for Buffalo here, not just because of that, and also because what you said, but just overall. I think there's some distrust of Houston in the market, having been here with Bill O'Brien before. Although Houston, in recent memory, has won a few wild card round games. They beat the playoff playoff jinx Bengals a couple of times in this round when Andy Dalton was in his first 2 years at quarterback, and then the Raiders without Derek Carr a few years ago when Connor Cook had to go into the game. But the Texans have never gotten past the division round. Buffalo, of course, as we know, hasn't won a playoff game since 1995. And that was Marv Levy still pulling levers there the year Elijah Pitts had to slip in for a couple of games. So it's been a while. But in both these teams took it easy last week. So you can see that. I think even looking at this game, I think the matchup, though, is really good. And we can go to school a bit on this game last year, which was down in Texas. It was down in Houston when Sean McDermott's defense gave Houston fits. Deshaun Watson was effectively stifled. He completed only 15 of 25 for 177, one TD pass, 2 picks, 7 sacks as well.
By the way,
that was a game.
Josh Allen got hurt in that game.
Well, that was the next point. Yeah, that was the next point. He got hurt, and Peterman came in and coughed up a pick 6 in the last 2 minutes, and that's why they lost. I think the matchup here is pretty good, though, for Buffalo, mainly because of Tre'Davious White. And a team that comes at Buffalo with its main threat being a passing combination, in this case it's Watson to DeAndre Hopkins, you're going to have to go up against a shutdown quarterback who is sort of defender who can limit any wideout. And that's a pretty good formula here for Buffalo. And that's why I think this matchup seems to work pretty good, and they're well built to do it. Now, can this offense do enough here? That's been the question for a while.
Sure.
They haven't scored more than 17 in the last 4 weeks. They've been against some primo defenses, but I think Josh Allen can do enough. And one thing he can do now, Watson does this some well, but I think Allen does it better. I mean, he can run. He ran for over 500 yards and 9 TDs. I mean, that's down in the red zone.
Just to jump in on that point, and what I would say to you, Bruce, is Allen's protected the football. Allen turned into a pocket passer this year. He was not looking to run. When he did, he was still very, like last year was insane. They would run guys on 9 routes, and he'd run for 25, 30 yards at a clip. But he was not running the ball, Bruce, because they wanted to keep him upright. You're in the playoffs now. I think Allen could run wild in this game and be way more willing to tuck it and run, which I do think will help produce points. Only because of the time of year now. Watch for him to use his feet a lot more. I really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, he scored 9 rushing touchdowns this year, and a lot of those on those sorts of escaping runs down by the goal line. Anyway, added up, we're on the Buffalo side here. We had it Bills 20, Houston 17.
Yep.
I think it might stay under. Houston lost in this round to Indy last year coming in, and I think Buffalo can do the same thing on Saturday.
It's intriguing. There's no doubt. I think Houston's got to run the ball. If Hyde can have a big day, I mean, I think they have to run the ball. But I think you nailed it, Bruce. I mean, I was down to the knuckles all week when the Bills were talking about starting their starters, and I said, well, the one guy shouldn't be within 10 miles of the stadium because, honest to God, I believe there were 2 guys on offense. They have a running game with Singletary. They don't without him. And the other guy is Trey White's every bit as good as Stephon Gilmore. He's a lockdown cornerback, and if he takes Hopkins away, then they're going to suck them in to try to find Fuller, and then they've got the 2 safeties that fly under the radar as good a safety combination as there in the league. It's an interesting chess match to get the weekend started. Here's the other one. Tennessee's at New England. I can't wait to hear what your projection is going to be. New England 4.5, 5. Total on the game is 43.5. Buddy, I got a funny feeling. I think both of these wild card teams in the AFC are dangerous. They kind of remind me, it's different. Tennessee would maybe apply more than Buffalo. Buffalo was in for the long haul. Tennessee reminds me of a team that played their lungs out at the end of the year, an NHL team, and got in as an 8 seed and then knocked off the regular season champ. Tennessee strikes me as such a dangerous team. And maybe at the moment, one of the most dangerous offensive teams in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's really, since Tannehill took over for Mariota, and Mike Vrabel's probably thinking, why did I wait so long to do this season? But it took him 6 weeks. And it was that shutout game in Denver that convinced Vrabel he had to make a change. They brought Tannehill in very late in that game. He had it with Mariota. Since then, 7-3 straight up against the line, and they roared their way into the playoffs. A couple of those losses were close, too. They also started to lean a bit more.
And 9 of 10 over, Bruce.
Yeah, 9 of 10 over, and they also started to lean a bit more on Derrick Henry as well, and he ended up leading the league in rushing. That over, this total is reachable, and we thought it would get over. The price is a little bit less than we thought, but there's room in there. If we're reluctant to pick against New England to lose but not cover this one, we are going to lean to the Tennessee side. New England, I think now, we have seen, there are storm signals here since mid-season, and that loss to the Dolphins, that was a game the Patriots were trying to win, and this just feels a little bit different. Now they've come into the playoffs kind of cold before. 4 years ago, they lost to the Jets and Dolphins on the road to blow home field that year. They didn't have to go in the wild card round. They ended up losing the AFC title game in Denver. That, I think, cost them having not to play that game at home. But this game at Miami yesterday, Brady had never lost in the NFL as a 14 or more point favorite. New England hadn't lost as a favorite this big since that 1978 Monday night game. You might remember that with the Colts and Joe Washington going wild. They were a 17-point favorite and lost that night. It's been 41 years since they lost a game as a 17-point favorite. You add it up, and the unavoidable conclusion is this doesn't seem like business unusual in Foxborough. One other thing, we mentioned the Trey White-Gilmore comparison. I think Tennessee, though, is built much better to go against New England than some other teams because they don't have to worry that their main offensive weapon could get shut down here by Gilmore. Instead, it's Henry. So they're going to come at New England a little bit different way. And it may negate the impact that Gilmore could potentially have on this game. So that's another reason that their game plan doesn't optimally set up for Gilmore to shut down a heavily targeted player. So that's important for Tennessee. Our score forecast is 24-23 New England, just because, are we going to pick the Patriots to lose here? We just couldn't pull that trigger, although we could certainly see it. And we don't have to lay the points either. So Tennessee and over has been a good combination to cash since Tannehill got in there. Why not again this week?
Let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. It's not a black and white thing, but this will be how I approach this game. I'm at halftime, I'm jumping in. I'm taking Tennessee in the second half. And here's the thing. Tennessee, for whatever reason, they come out and they do a bunch of stuff. And, Belichick, it'll be a bit of a chess match. But for whatever reason, in many instances, they wait to unleash Henry in the third and fourth quarters, and they wear defenses down. And, they've got weapons galore. Tannehill's playing at an incredibly high level. The New England loss to Miami, I'm sorry. Sitting with a good friend of ours, you and I, Bruce, with Andy yesterday, and he's making the case. And I said, no, there's no New England. You're kidding me. New England wanted that game, desperately wanted that game. They wanted a bye to be one win away from the Super Bowl. I think it cost them a chance to go to the Super Bowl, losing to the Dolphins, and I think it could have a residual effect this week. But I do believe, can they win? Just like you're saying, yeah, nail biters, sure. But I think Tennessee is the side in the second half because they wear teams down.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And we've seen this New England offense. It's not the same. And you can tell some of the things Belichick did all the way at the start of the season. No Gronk. They had survived that for short periods of time in the past, but it was different this year without Gronk there. And that's why Belichick tried for Antonio Brown. That fizzled back in September. He was desperate to find another wideout to maybe distort the field at the deadline. He could do no better than Mohamed Sanu from the Falcons, but he's more of a complementary threat to Julio Jones anyway. This offense just isn't the same, and we've seen it. We've seen the last 2 months them struggling. This time it feels different for New England.
All right, let's move on, and we'll go to Sunday, and now we go to the NFC. The interesting thing here is the number with Minnesota, New Orleans, and the Saints 8, and the total on the game is 47.5. I'm not going to overreact, which we always caution people. Don't go nuts with what you last witnessed. And I'm not going to get off this Minnesota belief that they are a dangerous football team. New Orleans, Drew Brees, offense that's singing like a top. But, I will tell you, Bruce, the Niners game was crazy. It was a wild shootout. They lost by 2. But to go bananas, they beat a Carolina team that had run for the bus. They beat a Tennessee team. And Tennessee gave them all they could handle without Henry playing in the game. All right, they beat Indy, who basically the air was out of the balloon in that game. And Atlanta gave them all they could handle in 2 games, beat them once, lost a close one. In games once Atlanta was already eliminated, I'm not going over the top on New Orleans. And then people think of Minnesota of late. Oh, they look terrible. Well, they didn't have the running game. That was the whole premise why Minnesota is dangerous. If Cook can run the ball, then Diggs, Thielen, and Rudolph and their tight ends, they can pile up points. I think the number is inflated because of what we've seen recently from New Orleans and recently from Minnesota. But I think Minnesota's shown up as a different football team this week.
Well, I could see that, and I think they're catching. New Orleans, curiously enough, was a much better force, especially against the spread on the road this season, 7-1, than at home. Go back to late last season, the last 12 games at the Superdome, the Saints have only covered 4 of them. So, for whatever reason, they're sort of an inside-out team, and defensively, since they lost those guys, Rankins and Davenport up front, they could be a bit vulnerable there. I think the problem we have right now, with the Vikings, and maybe we shouldn't focus so much on this, but it was a Green Bay game. The lasting impression of the playoffs of Cousins was that unimpressive performance against the Packers, which also dropped Cousins to 0-9 straight up all time and featured Monday night games. Now, this is a playoff game, not Monday night, but I mean, it's that big stage in the NFL that Cousins hasn't performed well on. Now, that was a game without Dalvin Cook. Of course, they rested a lot of guys yesterday. I still don't know about his shoulder, and that is what and Cook's Boone is a decent back in there, but Madison is also hurt, and Cook hurting. When they have Cook healthy, they can make that play action stuff work. And you saw in that game against Green Bay, the Packers just weren't respecting it, and Cousins can usually sell it well, and that was a little tweak that Gary Kubiak added to this offense when Mike Zimmer put him on staff. The Saints defense, I think you can attack right in the middle. We saw Garoppolo do this incessantly in that game the Niners won down there, and it was mostly Kittle in that game, but it was mostly off of play action. And if Cook isn't in there, if they don't establish a running game, that's the whole key here. And I'm not sure that Cook plays, or if he does, if he's compromised, and that might swing the pendulum to New Orleans' favor. I will say this, a stat that is really good in the Saints' favor. 8 turnovers this season. That's an all-time NFL low. They don't beat themselves, and they are coming in here pretty hot. The numbers Breeze has put up, and Kamara all of a sudden has awoken from his touchdown slumber. 4 in the last 2 weeks, and Breeze is in top form. We took New Orleans 31-19. At the start, we were thinking about Minnesota. In the end, we just ended up not quite trusting Cousins. I hear everything, the Minnesota argument. I just saw this team with Cook not 100%. Something looked wrong in that.
What did you make the score?
31-19.
Okay. Well, that would do it. It's funny. You look at the 4 games, and Tennessee's a quirky one a little bit, but you still got that New England defense. You know, in Wild Card weekend, Bruce, we always get one game, right, that's 42-39, or there's every year. This Minnesota-New Orleans game has the makings of the track meet. I mean, I think this could be like the Niners-San Fran game. I'm with you. I lean over the total in the game and think the number's inflated on New Orleans. It's intriguing, but there are a lot of question marks.
Yeah, oh, definitely so. And I think Cook is the big one now. And if they get him back, I think Minnesota's really dangerous. I'm just a little. What we saw against Green Bay, that was not Minnesota at its best. And Cousins needs some help. And you got to hope his big running back is ready.
And here's a crazy one, Bruce. Seattle is at Philly, 1.5 on the road. The total on the game is 46. I'll tell you, you shake your head. New England doesn't beat Miami with a chance for a bye. In Seattle, just sheer stupidity at the end of that game. First of all, the refs the league doesn't review the interference. And then the crazy thing was Marshawn Lynch cost him the game. It's not his fault, but he cost him the game. They rush him in there with 25 seconds left on the ball on the 1-inch line. But the reality of it, Bruce, it didn't call for him there. They were not going to run the ball on that play. They had no timeouts left. There were 25 seconds left. Wilson's going to throw it twice, and then you're going to give it to Lynch. So shuttling Lynch in and out of there, and then they take all this time in the huddle probably telling Lynch what the hell to do, and they take a delay a game. It's maybe the worst delay a game penalty in the history of football. And tell me you didn't think this all over again, and then they show Pete Carroll on the sidelines, with the lost look. Didn't instantly your brain go to Seattle and the Patriots in the Super Bowl?
Yes. Oh God, yes. It sure did. And now when they botched it up. By the way, there's been a pattern this year. Teams at the end of the game, inside the 1, not being able to score. And the penalty hurt the Seahawks last night. The Chargers had that game in Tennessee. There's been a few others. But yeah, that did. However, Lynch did in the second half sort of look like the old beast mode again for a while. That enlivened Seattle. Boy, it was set up for Seattle. That was the finish you saw there for them to win the whole thing. But it didn't happen. Now, though, what do we think about the Eagles this week? Wentz has willed Philadelphia here. That game, they were in trouble against the Giants. That is a very misleading score. And Daniel Jones still has a mistake problem there. At a tie game, they were in Philadelphia territory, and they botched up a drive there. And then that fumble was disastrous when the score was 20-17, about a 25-yard loss, and they give the ball to the Eagles on the 2. They were in a scrap in that game. That score is very deceiving. Back to the first regular season meeting here. It wasn't that long ago, so we can refer to it at least. Now, Philadelphia was banged up in that game, like it is again this week. All the receivers were out. They had offensive line injuries. They also got really sloppy in that game. Wentz, maybe his worst game of the year, 2 fumbles, 2 picks. They had 5 turnovers overall. And Seattle didn't have to do much in the game with Wilson. Only completed 13 passes, but they got ahead early, and they ended up winning 17-9. They were able to run the ball pretty well that day, and Rashad Penny had the big day, 129 on the ground. Now, Seattle's had all these guys hurt since then. We talked about the running backs, and that's why Lynch is even there. But I think in this spot, Seattle, much like New Orleans this year, played its best football on the road. 7-1 versus a line away. They won in here. I don't know that Philadelphia can have Wentz carry the day without so many of his key support cast into the playoffs. You can squeeze by the Giants and the Redskins without your guys. Now you got to beat a real playoff team. I don't think it's going to happen. 24-17, we took Seattle here. I think the fun ends for Philly this week. It's an interesting story, and the number is a little bit more reduced than it would have been had San Francisco come in here. But I think Russell Wilson will end up getting Seattle out there with a W and advancing into the next week, and maybe rematch with the Niners.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's crazy. But Philly's going to, have the bulletin board material. Nobody thinks we should be here, blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing, but you know what? They found a way to win the close games, Bruce. And I will tell you, perception-wise, for Seattle in the home stretch here, they lost 3 or 4. In the game they won, they barely beat Carolina, who'd already run for the bus.
Yeah, and then there's no such thing as an easy game for Seattle, and they only won 1 game by more than 8 this year, and that was against Arizona early. So, every game was kind of close for them here. We'll see. I mean, Philly does rise to the moment, and we saw Wentz. By the way, just a note, he's making his first playoff start in this game. He wasn't there the last 2 years when they were in, so that's another thing just to think about this week.
All right, there you have it. A look at the Wild Card weekend. Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing. We're psyched. Let the postseason tournament begin.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and/or interpersonal relationships. At betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.